A few years ago, I had this bright idea that I was going to build a school. It was going to have an online academy and an actual building in Tanzania. I didn't want a giant international school or some fancy campus with hundreds of students. I just wanted a small school rooted in supporting the growth and development of a few children and families. I mentioned previously my thoughts about Elimu ya Kujitegemea in other videos and how I was inspired by Nyerere's educational frameworks. So in textbook Virgo fashion, I thought the natural progression was for me to follow in the footsteps of Nyerere. And looking back, I can see where I messed up. So I'm a bit nervous, but for the sake of transparency, I want to share it with you. If you're new here, karibuni. My name is Yahaira, and this channel is a living archive documenting my journey building Kin and Soil from the ground up. Kin and Soil exists to help children flourish through compassionate care, education, storytelling, and regenerative living. Now that you know a little bit more about me, let's get into it. The whole real deal Holyfield of it all. Oh, I hope that you all enjoyed the walk down memory lane with my old videos that I've been reposting for about a month or so. Let me know if you want to see more read alouds in the future. Put it in the comments. Today I want to talk about something that I've never really spoken about publicly in detail. For years, I carried this quiet embarrassment around. Basically, I had talked about the vision publicly. I had done fundraising. I had started the paperwork. I had told people what I wanted to build, and then it never happened. So today I want to tell that story because I think that there are lessons inside of it that may help somebody else. And after sitting with this experience for a few years, I don't even think that the biggest lesson was about education. I think that the biggest lesson was about community. So buckle up, it's gonna be fun. We're feeling our feelings today, all of them, live and in color. The inspiration for the school started for me way before I was living in Tanzania. But Tanzania is essentially what gave me the language to the thoughts and the ideas that I've had throughout my teaching career. At the start of this bright idea, I was already an educator. I had taught in public schools, charter schools, Montessori schools, private schools, and had spent years trying to understand what education was supposed to be. If you've been following this channel for any amount of time, then you already know that I came across the philosophy of education for self-reliance. In Swahili, they call it Elimu ya Kujitegemea. I learned about this through my research for my film, Teacher Don't Teach Me Nonsense. So I'm learning about Julius Nyerere and his ideas that schools could be connected to agriculture and community well-being, and all of that absolutely blew my mind. You know, for the first time, I saw a framework that had answered questions I had been wrestling with for years. Questions like, what if education wasn't primarily about producing workers? Or what if education was about helping communities sustain themselves? And what if children learned how to feed themselves? What if they learned how to steward the land? And what if schools generated value for the communities that they served, actually, in totality? So once I saw those ideas, I couldn't unsee them. And like a lot of people who discover something that changes their life, I got excited. Maybe a little too excited, okay? Because I immediately jumped to the question of like, how do I build this? And looking back, like, that's where my first mistake happened. That was number one. And I was so focused on the vision that I also wasn't fully appreciating the infrastructure required to support the vision, So I'll be jumping around here. I do have my notes. I'm looking at them, but there's things that there's a lot of things on this. So please bear with me. So fast forward the tape. I completed the first stages of the registration for the school. And because I know that some people may have questions about the fundraising campaign that I did back then, I want to be transparent about that too. So from the money that I received from the GoFundMe, I was able to use this for the legal process. So basically, when you're not a citizen living in a foreign country, wanting to build a business, many times like you don't have the leverage that you need, especially in the beginning. So this legal advice becomes like top priority. And this is, if you listen to other people's videos, this is the due diligence that they're talking about. Okay. So basically, for those who may be thinking about building a business in a country where you don't have citizenship or you don't have a community, what I did was I hired a lawyer and I went to the Office of International Investment. So these offices have different names in different countries. In Tanzania, it's called the Tanzania Investment Center. If you're in Zanzibar, it's called ZIPA, or Zanzibar Investment Promotion Authority. So between your lawyer and the investment office, you should be able to get a solid answer as to how to open a business effectively in whichever country that you're doing this in. So I just want to make that clear. Like, you are going to need funds to work with the lawyer and to work with the Office of International Investment. I spoke about this in other videos that I've made, but when you're making these moves outside of America, like even with professional help, you're still taking a risk. And something that became clearer to me in this process from my experience is that there are also subtle cultural norms that I was not picking up on. So the biggest one that I hate, but because I am a woman, I am a foreign woman, I am a single Black foreign woman with my own agency and resources, for whatever reason, that kind of rubs people the wrong way, especially in Muslim influenced countries. So I've started to pick up on that. And, you know, there is a leverage that is needed when you're doing business in other countries that I saw that I didn't necessarily have, you know. Like, yes, I had some salience within the culture from making my film, but that didn't necessarily translate into a business environment like I thought it would. So there's that part. And I also started realizing the true scale of what I was trying to build. You know, like, to create this ecosystem out of thin air was more than I felt like I could do at the time. You know, I had on the ground support. Shout out to my friends in the Fumba Town community in Zanzibar. But, you know, even that was a challenge because many of the families living in Fumba Town that would have been my target clientele, they were not even there for the whole school year. You know, they were more nomadic, you know, doing world schooling, things of that nature. So people were asking me like, oh, can we just like bring our kids for a few months and then whatever. And I'm like, no, I need a whole year. Like, I need at least 9 months, you know? So I was learning through the process that my main source of community members were not in one location for the entire school year. And looking back also, like, to fully out there, transparent, you know, I was not also clear about my target clientele because I was trying to reach, you know, Black migrants or Black expats, whatever you want to call us. But I was also trying to reach Black people back in the States and in the Americas through my online portion. And then I was also trying to reach local Zanzibaris. Now, this is totally doable. This is feasible, but just not for one person. So the next part may rub some people the wrong way, but, you know, it's clear that a school cannot survive on inspiration alone. You know, at some point I had to be honest with myself. Like, I did not have enough people. I had and have the vision. You know, I had and have the passion. I have the educational experience, but what I didn't have at that time was the community infrastructure that I needed to support what I was trying to create, you know? So that hit me hard. that was a blow. And, you know, when you're passionate about something, it's easy to interpret a lack of support as rejection. And it's easy to start asking questions like, why don't more people care about this? Or, you know, why are people spending their time talking about celebrities or paying for Coachella tickets or whatever, Love Island episode, whatever, and like our children are still struggling, So if I'm being completely transparent, I wrestled with those thoughts. I was going to say present tense, but as time went on, like I realized that most people are carrying an allostatic load that is invisible. What I mean by that is like allostatic load is like, some people are trying to survive while others may be taking care of elderly parents, or some people are working multiple jobs, and then some people are just like literally they may see the vision, but they don't have anything or any capacity to contribute. So there's that. And then on the other hand, some people simply don't share those same priorities. Like that doesn't necessarily mean that they don't care. It just means that they're kind of like on a different life journey. And I had to remember like my own priorities were not here always. So I had to learn and am learning how to give grace for folks, while also staying open for the right people to enter into my ecosystem and the right people that have the same priorities, so that it could be not just right time and place, but right people. So once I stopped viewing the situation through the lens of judgment and disappointment, I was able to learn something much deeper, which is, community has to be cultivated. And it has to be cultivated slowly, with patience, con calma, especially when you're entering into a country where you're not a citizen, or maybe you are a citizen, but you grew up somewhere completely different. Like, humility is the only way that you're going to make it. And I know that we as the diaspora sometimes have a problem with that word, especially as African Americans or Caribbean people who have a very rich history of revolution and like, raging against the machine. But it is what it is. Like, I'm not saying that you have to agree with how your new country operates, but what I experienced and what became clear to me is that I am a guest in this country, even if I don't see myself that way. Even though I know the history of my people and how we were taken and enslaved, that doesn't mean that the political borders of the time recognizes me as what I recognize myself to be. So let's make that clear. That's going to come up. If you're anything like me, that's going to keep coming up amongst your travels. And to be honest, I spent way too much time trying to convince people to see me as what I am. I know who I am, and I don't need anyone to validate that. I've said that in other videos, but that took me some time, because how I look to people, or, because the language that I speak, like they only see Muzungu. and not just any Muzungu, like they see a Muzungu woman operating on her own with resources. Like that equation is going to draw suspicion. And like, I get it. I understand where that comes from, even here in the US, like someone like me may draw suspicion in certain communities because people are not used to seeing Black people so free, especially a Black woman. What? And you don't got a husband or a sponsor, and it's just a teacher's salary? Like, what? Something ain't adding up, But it's fine. Like, I understand where that comes from. And it's not just like if you're a single Pringle like me, or, a free Black woman. Like, it's not just you that's gonna draw suspicion. Like, you also have to understand, even if you're going as a family, like people don't, around the world, in America, in the Americas, in Africa, everywhere in the world, people don't understand why we want to move back to Africa right now. Like, especially when you see all of these stories of like different African born family members, finding a way out of no way to migrate to Europe, to migrate to the Americas. Like, it's real. I get it. So once you can manage to put yourself into that perspective of our African born family members, then the next step for you is to provide value. And like I said, I was moving out of order. So you have to make sure that you're giving the right value for the people on the ground, because like I said, My film provided value, but it was not enough value to give me leverage in the business arena. So keep that in mind. And like, I know this is going to ruffle some feathers. I know that, over time, once you're providing this value over time, then and only then should you think about opening up your business. And when I say provide value, I'm saying like provide value from whatever your expertise is. But okay, get ready. This value, you're most likely going to have to provide for free. Okay? Take a deep breath. I already know what you're saying. Okay? Oh, they sold us and I was working for 400 plus years for free. Like, why do I got to keep doing this work for free? I'm not saying that it's fair. But it is what it is. Like, realistically, at the recording date, as it stands at the recording date of this video, Africa needs people who are willing to get down in the mud and build. Like, if you're in that same mindset as me, you understand that the building of the continent of Africa is necessary for all melanated people across the world to gain the global respect that we deserve. Like, our destinies are intricately welded together, whether we like it or not. So once I got those emotions all in check and I was feeling my feelings, which took a long time, I started asking myself even harder questions like, why was I focused on building this school for other people's children when I hadn't even built my own family yet? And I want to make it clear, like, I believe in education. I believe children deserve better learning environments. I believe school systems can be transformed into pillars of the community. And, I also continue to stand 10 toes down on the notion that there is no such thing as other people's children. Like, it's just our children. Okay. But it became clear to me that at that point in my life, I was trying to skip ahead chapters and I was trying to build an institution before fully building the life that I wanted. I was thinking that because there's a need, which there are many needs on the world is needy right now. Okay. But just because there's a need doesn't mean that you have to be the one to fill it. I know now that wisdom is knowing when something is for today and when something is for later. So I had learned this lesson that, my role was to continue learning and to continue refining my philosophy for now. I feel like so much noise of my generation is to like rush to have children, rush to get married, rush to start a family, rush to become an entrepreneur. And like, none of those things are inherently bad, but moving out of order is, okay? I'm gonna keep talking about that. Moving out of order is moving on something before you have the maturity to hold it, or maybe you do have the maturity, but just not the financial resources or the community or whatever thing that will give you the leverage. Like, all of that needs to be taken into consideration. So since I stepped back from my dream of building the academy, I have since discovered Bishop Tricia Hershey's NAP ministry. And like, learning her framework really freed me even more, because she was talking about doing less, resting more. She was talking about rest being the actual revolution that we're all seeking. And, that our ancestors essentially had to work and toil from womb to tomb for so many generations. Like, breathing is just enough. And I keep reminding breathing is just enough. So that's what I did in that season. And I know you may be thinking like I'm contradicting myself, but two things can be true at the same time. Sometimes the moment requires you to be on the front lines, and sometimes the moment requires you to rest. So I started taking stock and inventory of like all of the work that I did up to that point. I had made my debut documentary. That was a lot, and I wasn't cognizant of the toll that it took on me, to be honest. I did good work. I gave it my best. And It started beautiful, amazing conversations that were needed in our community, but my health and wellness needed to be addressed more. And like, period, right? So I did something that was very difficult for eldest daughter Virgos to do. Okay. I laid down and I rested, and I took time to see what was important to me. Part of all of this process was also accepting the mantle that it takes to raise children, whether it be as a parent or as a teacher. Like, children require a tremendous amount of attention, care, patience, resources, emotional labor, and I'm not shy about speaking about my desire to homeschool my children whenever I move into motherhood. But like, the question kept coming up for me was like, do I even want to do all this? Like, I'm spending my life force building this school when it really feels more aligned to cultivate a love story with myself and then someone else, and so I can have babies my own babies in the first place. I've had students countless times tell me that they wish that I was their mother, that they loved my teaching style, that they loved the attention that I gave them. Like, I know I will be a great mother, and that's on everything. I'm going to be a great mother. So, like, don't get me wrong. Like, I love my role of helping raise children that I didn't birth as their teacher. I really love that role. I'm okay with that role right now. But, along the way, I realized that I also want to experience motherhood too. And I want to raise my own children, and I want to see what it means to cultivate a learning environment inside of my own home. But all of that honestly takes time. Like I said earlier, you can't rush building a healthy family. Like, it quite literally starts with me. with my emotions, with my life force. It quite literally starts with me. I think another thing that helped me make peace with all of this was realizing that I actually never stopped building the school in the first place. I look at Kin and Soil as an evolution from the school. Now I have taken on a new role as a birth worker, and I'm learning the steps to help our sisters usher in new life. Like, that's been a beautiful experience. And also with Kin and Soil, I feel like for whatever reason, it's easier to learn about environmental stewardship, which, like, although that was a pillar of the school that I started, I guess I had to like come out of the classroom for a little bit. In some way, I feel that Kin and Soil is becoming my classroom. And, every video that I'm making, I still feel like I'm teaching. I still feel like high level conversations are still being had in real life with people that I meet and in my community. So like, it's not necessarily a classroom that I originally imagined, but this is a classroom nonetheless. Okay. You logged onto your Black Mirror and you clicked on my face. This is my classroom. Okay. So like, I still believe in the traditional stand and deliver teaching. Like, I still believe that has its place, and I may weave, back in and out of the traditional classroom as I see fit. But like, my biggest goal is to create a safe and loving environment for the children that I'm going to birth through my womb. And I have to be laser focused on that until that day comes. So in the meantime, in between time, I will continue to help children flourish through compassionate care, education, storytelling, and regenerative living. Okay. Like, this is all kind of the same thing for me, to be honest, but whatever. To wrap this up, I don't really like view this experience as a failure. I see it more so like the tuition that I needed to pay to level up. So throughout this entire soliloquy, like, take what resonates and leave the rest. Okay. So I'm done. If you've ever had a dream, this was a lot. If you ever had a dream that didn't unfold the way that you expected, let me know in the comments, okay? I love to hear what lessons came out of it for you. I'm going to go touch some grass right now with my people. Go and touch some grass with your people, okay? Sending love. Sending love, all the love. AMANI na UPENDO.